Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Today's First Chapter Friday is going to be one of my favorite books. It is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. A couple years ago, they did come out with a movie about this. Typically, I don't enjoy nonfiction books, but this book was amazing. It's a true life story about a World War II hero and how he survived. And he went through all these horrible, awful things during World War II. And he survived. And he had an amazing tale to tell of his time during the war. And again, I'm not a nonfiction person, and I don't typically like things like this, but I loved it. And it still remains to be one of my favorite books. And we have, actually in the library, 2 copies of the young adult version that was adapted for young adults. The adult version isn't terrible, but some of the things he went through was kind of horrific. So I think they kind of tamed it down for that. But I will read to you some of Chapter 1. I don't think all of it because it's kind of long. Chapter 1, The One Boy Insurgency. In the pre-dawn darkness of August 26, 1929, in a small house in Torrance, California, a 12-year-old boy sat up in bed listening. There was a huge, heavy rushing sound, growing ever louder, coming from directly above the house. The boy swung his legs off the bed, raced out the back door, and loped onto the grass. The yard was otherworldly, shivering with sound. The boy stood beside his brother, head thrown back, spellbound. The sky had disappeared. An object he saw only in silhouette, reaching across a massive arc of space, was suspended low over the house. It was longer than 2.5 football fields and as tall as a city. It was putting out the stars. It was the German airship Graf Zeppelin, nearly 800 feet long and 110 feet high. It was the largest flying machine ever crafted. It was the wonder of the world. The airship was 3 days from completing a sensational feat, a journey around the globe. It had begun on August 7th, when Zeppelin had slipped its tethers in New Jersey and headed for Manhattan. On Fifth Avenue that summer, construction was soon to begin on a new skyscraper, the Empire State Building. At Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, Babe Ruth prepared to hit his 500th home run. On Wall Street, stocks raced toward an all-time high. After a lap around the Statue of Liberty, Zeppelin blanked north, then turned over the Atlantic. In time, it reached Europe. The ship passed over Nuremberg, Germany, where an obscure politician named Adolf Hitler had just called for the killing of the weakest babies to strengthen the German race. Then it flew east of Frankfurt, where a Jewish woman was nursing her newborn, Anne Frank. Sailing northeast, the Zeppelin crossed over Siberia, where villagers so isolated they'd never even seen a train fell to their knees at the sight of it. On August 19th, as 4 million Japanese waved handkerchiefs, the Zeppelin circled Tokyo and sank onto a landing field. 4 days later, the ship rose into a typhoon that whisked it over the Pacific toward America. Passengers gazing from the windows saw the ship's shadow following it on the clouds like a huge shark. When the clouds parted, they glimpsed giant creatures turning in the sea that looked like monsters. On August 25th, the Zeppelin reached San Francisco, where crowds thronged the streets to see it. Turning south, it slid through sunset, across midnight, and over Torrance, where the boy in his pajamas stood. Under the airship, his feet bare in the grass, he was transfixed in the dark. He felt the rumble of the craft's engines, but couldn't see the ship itself. He saw only blackness, so vast it seemed to swallow heaven itself. The boy's name was Louie Zambrini, the son of Italian immigrants. He'd come into the world in Olean, New York, on January 26, 1917, an 11.5-pound baby boy with black hair as coarse as barbed wire. From the moment he could walk, Louie couldn't be corralled. The instant his mother thumped him down and told him to be still, he vanished. If she didn't if she didn't have her squirming boy clutched in her hands, she usually had no idea where he was. In 1919, when 2-year-old Louie was sick with pneumonia, he climbed out his bedroom window, descended 1 story, and went on a naked dash through town with a policeman chasing him and a crowd watching in amazement. Soon after, during the family's move to California, Louie bolted, ran through the train, and leapt from the caboose. Frantic as the train rolled backward in search of her lost boy, Louie's mother spotted him strolling in perfect serenity. Swept into her arms, Louie smiled. "I knew you'd come back," he said in Italian. In California, the family settled in Los Angeles suburb of Torrance. Louie was as wild as ever. At 5, he started smoking, picking up cigarette butts while walking to kindergarten. He began drinking one night when he was 8. He hid under the dinner table, snatched glasses of wine, drank them all dry, staggered right off the front porch, and fell into a rose bush. Leaping around one day, he impaled his leg on a bedpost. That means the bedpost went through his leg. On another day, a neighbor had to sew his nearly severed toe back on. When Louie came home drenched in oil after driving into an oil rig well and nearly drowning, it took a gallon of turpentine and a lot of scrubbing before his father recognized him again. Thrilled by the crashing of boundaries, Louie was untamable. In Torrance, a rebel was born. If it was edible, Louie stole it. Housewives who stepped from their kitchens returned to find their suppers gone. Residents, looking out their windows, saw a long-legged boy dashing by. A stolen cake balanced on his hands. He broke into his neighbor's house, bribed their Great Dane with a bone, and cleaned out their icebox. That was their refrigerators. He picked the lock at the town bakery, snatched pies, ate until he was full, and used the rest as ammunition for ambushes. Years later, when Louie told of his youth, most of his stories ended with, "Then I ran like mad." People he robbed often chased him, and some threatened to shoot him. To minimize the evidence found on him when the police habitually came his way, he set up loot-stashing sites, including a cave he dug in the forest. Louie's older brother Pete once found one of his stolen wine jugs under the Torrance High bleachers. It was teeming with drunken ants. In the Torrance Theater lobby, Louie crammed the payphone coin slots with toilet paper, then returned later to feed wire behind the coins stacked up inside, hook the paper, and fill his palms with change. A metal dealer never guessed that the grinning kid who often came by to sell him copper scrap had stolen the same scrap from his lot the night before. Discovering while scuffling with an enemy that adults would give quarters to fighting kids to pacify them, Louie declared a truce with the enemy and cruised around staging brawls. When a teacher stood Louie in the corner for spitballing, he deflated her car tires. He set a Boy Scout state record in friction fire ignition by mixing his tinder with gasoline and match heads, causing a small explosion. He stole a neighbor's coffee percolator tube and set up a sniper's nest in a tree, spat pepper tree berries through the tube, and sent girls running. His greatest feat became legend. Late one night, Louie climbed a church steeple, tied a piano wire to the bell, strung the wire to a nearby tree, and roused the police, firefighters, and all of Torrance with apparently spontaneous pealing. Some townsfolk called it a miracle. During a raucous childhood, Louie made more than just mischief. He shaped who he'd become. Confident that he was clever and bold enough to escape anything, he was almost incapable of discouragement. When history carried him into war, his resilient optimism would define him. Louie was 2 years younger than his brother, who was everything he wasn't. Pete Zamprini was handsome, popular, and silky smooth with the girls. He ushered his mother into her seat at dinner, went to bed at 7, and rose at 2:30 to run a 3-hour paper route, tucking his alarm clock under his pillow so he wouldn't wake Louie, who shared a bed with him. He had a gallant habit of carrying pins in his pant cuffs in case his dance partner's dress strap broke. He once saved a drowning girl. Pete radiated a gentle authority that led everyone, even adults, to be swayed by his opinion. Louie idolized Pete, who watched over him and their younger sisters, Sylvia and Virginia, with a parent's protectiveness. But he was overshadowed, and he never heard the end of it, even from his mother, who wept as she asked Louie why he couldn't be like Pete. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. But as you can hear from the story, Louie was not that great of a child. In fact, it sounds like he was kind of almost every adult's worst nightmare. But he really became very resilient in this story, as it kind of alludes to in the beginning. But I thought, in honor of Veterans Day, this would be the perfect book to do First Chapter Friday for. So, if this sounds like a really good book, Unbroken, come to the library and check it out. Have a great 3-day weekend, everybody.